Howdy folks, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Alright, well I think the big news this week is EAP. Does Ptolemy, do you want to cover that one for a minute?
Yeah, good news. We have a release candidate, so that should be getting coming out real soon. So yeah, we're extremely happy about getting that out the door for many people. So
Yeah, so as we say, it's a release candidate, but we think it's the last release candidate. The plan is that this will be getting promoted as the default viewer in the next few days. Yeah, good point about yeah, well, it's been in RC, but this is the last RC, so there you go. So we firmly claim. Let's see. Yeah, the names are also kind of a big deal, although they're not really under my bailiwick. They're not content creation, and they're not really viewer side either. But yeah, it sounds like they're doing some cool stuff there. Anybody tried it out yet? No, tried changing their names. I suppose you haven't, since I recognize all the names so far. So let's see. So the post EAP, assuming that this RC does in fact go out as the default viewer in the next couple of days, the post EAP landscape has a whole lot of viewers queued up. We've kind of got the viewer pipeline all sort of filled up right at the very end. There is let's see. There's profiles, there's mesh upload, there's Love Me Render viewer, which has a few rendering changes that aren't part of EAP. You know, usual assortment of mate things, and I think a couple of others that I'm not coming up with off the top of my head. So exactly which of those are going to go out first is still TBD. Camera presets is another one. Love Me Render would be a pretty good candidate just because it's been completely done for quite a while. It's just been waiting behind EAP because we didn't want to complicate the merge process for the EAP viewer. Yeah, Muscadine unfortunately is not at the almost ready end of the pipeline. It's more sort of echoing hollowly down the depths of the tube. But yeah, I'm definitely hoping to get back to it at some point. Let's see. So I think that's it for release news, and that's about all I got this week. Anybody have other things they wanted to chat about or ask about? Let's see. A bunch of the stuff I've been doing is kind of behind the scenes for stuff we're not ready to talk about yet. I have a little bit of time to look at Arctan, and for Arctan, what I'm looking at is the avatar visibility controls. You know, we've got jelly dolls, but they're still not super efficient for avatars that have a ton of attachments. So doing a little bit of investigation, see if we can get better performance for those cases. Considering things like don't draw the rigged attachments at all for jelly dolled avatars, and if we did that, then that would also allow us to clear the things out of memory and potentially reduce some of the bad things that can happen in super complicated regions where people crash and that sort of thing. There's also just a few places where we're not treating jelly dolled avatars in a consistent way. Like if you set an avatar to never render, it should be treated the same as if it got jelly dolled due to complexity, but it actually doesn't. It's a lot more expensive to render because the shadows are still left on. Well, that's kind of goofy. It's like if you explicitly call somebody out for being somebody you don't want to see, then we spend a lot more effort rendering them than if they just get picked up by the complexity threshold. So just a few things like that. Some of these changes might be things that could be pulled into a mate viewer or something, so that they wouldn't stuck waiting for all of the Arc update aspect of Arctan, but the exact kind of release pathway there is still TBD. We're just kind of in the investigation stage. I'll toss this out to the crowd here. How much do you care about the quality of jelly dolled avatars? Or, I don't know if it's really by design or not, but right now we're spending quite a lot of resources managing and rendering the rigged meshes for avatars that are, supposed to be displayed in a very simplified way. And, I'm tempted to say that, they're jelly dolled anyway. We could be displaying them a lot simpler than that and saving a lot of resources. Do you think anybody would care if that happened? Loading icon sprite? Yeah, that sounds good. Maybe just clouds.
I mean, isn't even a cloud like alpha? Isn't that kind of a load?
Oh, sorry, Dan, can you say it again? You're coming through very soft.
Oh, I was thinking maybe even something simpler than clouds because, I mean, isn't alpha cloud, just another alpha sorting issue?
That's true. I mean, there would actually be simpler things we could do than a cloud. What I've been experimenting with is just displaying them as a, monochrome system avatar. So the system av gets displayed, but none of the attachments get shown. So that's a lot lighter weight. If you're wearing an avatar that distorts your shape considerably, like a non-human, then it definitely makes you look a little weird, though. Monochrome silhouette, but a silhouette of what? Would you feel strongly about including the the rig meshes, or just a system avatar? Yeah. Let's see, we had one comment about people don't use jelly dolls. So if you're in an extremely busy region and you can't render all of the avatars with reasonable performance, what do you do about it? Anything? Beck, you say de-render. I mean, there's a control where you can right-click someone and say, never render, but if you do that, they actually get turned into a jelly doll, at least in our view. Or is there a Firestorm control to make them completely invisible? Yeah. Don't like the looks. So you'd rather have avatars just not displayed at all rather than displayed in a kind of a funny looking colored blob style? Yeah. Yeah, actually that was another thing I was wondering about in the context of the current work is whether we should add another option to the another option you can set for other avatars, right? If you right click somebody, you can say never render, but that actually makes them a jelly doll. Should we have, two options instead, so it's like, jelly doll and invisible or whatever we call them? Because invisible may have some kind of funny consequences if you don't have name tags turned on, because you can't actually tell that they're there, but on the other hand, you can't complain they look bad because you're not seeing anything. So if you say render friends only, then the non-friends are invisible? Just clarifying that. Yeah, okay. Let's see. Silas asked if I meant jelly dolls or imposters. I do mean jelly dolls. I mean, there is kind of an overlapping ability to, display things in a less complicated way using imposters, and there's some overlap because jelly dolls are also impostered. But yeah, I was specifically talking about jelly dolls here. Generic silhouette light blue system avatar. Yeah, one thing I've been thinking about is, how do you make that look decent? Because if you've got an avatar where the skeleton is distorted, it's going to look really weird. If you don't say allow the skeleton to get distorted or to run any animations, then it's not going to be at all pose responsive. Like if somebody's supposed to be sitting in a chair, they're not going to be in a sitting pose. And maybe that's okay, but it's going to look funny in an area, like here, if the jelly dolls all looked like they were, standing through their seats instead of sitting on their seats, that might be a little screwy. Yeah, I wondered about just making them sort of an ellipsoid or something, because then there's not an issue if they're not posed appropriately. You don't really have any expectation that they're going to look like anything in particular. I say use a default avatar, ignore shape info. Does that also mean ignore animations? Animations can also drastically alter your shape. You can play an animation that will displace your joints and turn you into an elephant or something. So if you're doing that, should you show up as an elephant skeleton or not? Yeah, getting rid of the distortions from the mesh assets is a start, but you can create basically the same effect with animations if you're sufficiently determined.
Yeah, if you had a tiny avatar, it'd be bent in half.
Placeholder system avatar using system AO, okay. So something like ignore all animations except the standard system animations. Silas, I agree in principle that we could turn things into simplified meshes, but it would be a much bigger project. I don't think that's going to happen within the scope of the V1 Arctan at least. Yeah, auto LED is obviously another big topic that we've kicked around before, but not happening in the immediate Arctan future at least. Yeah, that's true, Beck. It's not just an LOD issue, but if we had the tech to generate auto LODs, then that would also give us a simplified approximation that we could use in other contexts. So, one if we knew that we had a decent looking, low, say low LOD, then we could basically swap it in as the shape we used when we're jelly dolling or whatever. Yeah, the simplified silhouette thing sounds kind of interesting. It'd be a little less obtrusive than having a kind of a solid blob. Yeah, Joe, I think if we actually, when we're just rendering the system avatar, that is going to be similar complexity to the Animesh. A few thousand polys draws pretty fast. Is there an advantage to using sort of an Animesh mesh instead of a system avatar in that case? Yeah, the knowing there's people around you thing seems kind of significant. It seems odd if it's when it's possible to have people be, invisible to you and not even showing up as name tags or something. So, as far as you're concerned, they don't exist, but then other people in the scene are seeing them, right up next to you or whatever. Then that's a little weird. I don't know how concerned people are about it. Yeah. Yeah, Silas, I think when people are jelly dolled with rigged meshes today, they do look kind of like the way I'm seeing you now. The problem is that they aren't necessarily efficient to draw because they're, the meshes that are getting used to generate those silhouettes can be pretty expensive. So we need to, make them, cheap to draw as well. Another thing I ran into in the process of looking at this stuff is that it's very expensive to generate the preview mesh when you right-click somebody if they're wearing a lot of rigged mesh attachments. So, I mean, that can mean that if you're trying to right-click someone to make them go away, it can take a long time to bring up the menu that lets you do that. It would be nice to make that more responsive. The people who are generating the, basically the people who are the slowest to click are the ones you're most likely to want to click. So it would be nice if we could make the menu come up right away without waiting for the mesh to get generated. Don't know how hard that would be, but just another idea that came up looking at this stuff. Yeah, is it important for non-humanoid avatars to be shown in non-human form? Yeah, I don't know. For my money, I think it's okay if they just show up as humans, but that's one of the questions that we should be thinking about.
Imagine there's two answers for that. The ones that are non-humans will want it, and the ones that aren't probably won't care.
Yeah, probably. I'm not sure what a lag dog is, but I like the expression. Yeah, and of course, if an avatar is cheap to draw anyway, then it's less likely that it's going to be getting rendered in some simplified form anyway, since it's not going to be triggering the complexity controls. But we need some sort of uniform plan for how the appearance gets generated anyway. Should the t-shirt say, "If you can read this, you're too far away"? Yeah, I think back. I think a rigged mesh can be perfectly lightweight. You know, the animesh stuff is mostly pretty lightweight because of the triangle limit, and you know, if we could display something of that complexity as our kind of standard substitute jelly doll, that would probably give similar performance to using the system avatar. Implementation-wise, it would be a little trickier because we'd have to, you know, shove an extra piece of content that isn't already there into the scene, whereas everybody already has a system avatar, even if it's not always displayed. Well, anyway, we don't have to resolve all these questions here, but I was just tossing that out because folks asked what I've been looking at recently. Anything else you want to chat about this week? Oh yeah, thanks for mentioning the mesh uploader. I also was curious if anybody has looked at the mesh uploader project viewer recently. QA-wise, that's pretty far along. I need to do a little more poking around with it myself. I haven't looked at it for a while. But that one may be getting close to release. You know, it incorporates some improvements that I think we originally got as contributions from Firestorm, and it also adds some additional info about things like joint offsets, better logging. So hopefully that'll help. But I didn't know if anybody had actually tried it out recently. Is it not a project viewer? I think it's a project viewer. Wait a minute. It's not a project viewer. That would explain the lack of feedback. Ah, it's not a project viewer. Okay, well, we should get it into a project viewer soon then. It's another thing we have a little more time to think about once Eep gets out the door. Oh, good. That's helpful to have a simple test case to repro these things. Cyrus, which bounding box limitations? For the limitations for the physics bounding box, or for the object graphical representation? Yeah, we really should be discarding degenerate triangles like that. I would have hoped that we already were. Yeah, the pivot to be imported from the DAE is currently stuck on needing simulator work. I think the viewer part has been done, but then it also has to be respected by the back end when you upload the information. Unfortunately, we're real short on back end people right now. It's pretty much all uplift all the time. Sorry, hiring's a little above my pay grade. Well, Silas, I don't think we're gonna like chase him down or anything, but I do wonder why we're not discarding triangles that have just one vertex. It seems like that would be a logical thing to do. I mean, if we changed anything, it would more likely be at the upload time, so that wouldn't actually explode a lot of existing content. Don't know, though. Anyway, as we say, hard to get back-end changes put through right now. Do you think it's tiny but not actually zero size? That could be it. Ptolemy, I'm not sure if we're talking about vertices in the graphics representation or in the physics rep.
Yeah, it could be handling them different, right?
GPU probably never sees the physics rep. I think that's just handled on the back end.
That could be.
Alright, well, maybe we should wrap it up for this week. Let's see, I think we've got the schedule already filled out through the rest of the month, but I'll double check on that. Don't have any non-meeting days coming up that I know of. So, should see everybody next week then. Sorry, I'm not sure I understand the question about rapid viewer releases. Oh, yeah, but not all RCs. I was just kind of talking through the fact that we've got a bunch of viewers that don't need much, if any, additional development work. And so there's quite a few options for kind of what to put out next after EAP gets released. But we don't really have a definite plan for that yet, so I can talk a little more about that once we have more specifics. But thanks for pointing out that Mesh Uploader is actually not out as a project viewer. It may not quite be ready to release, but I'm pretty sure that it's good enough to make into a project viewer, so we should be doing that. Swap out the release viewer for Muscadine when nobody's looking. Let's see. Yeah, when I have some time. Unfortunately, haven't recently, but we'll see. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Beck. I will try to get more info on that. We've, obviously we have a faster release cadence than Firestorm, but we do have quite a few things in the queue at this point, and we'll try to provide some useful context for that stuff. Yeah, normally I would say, at least wait on EAP, but then, whether the other things are going to be high nail enough that you're going to want to hold off for them, I don't know. You'll have to make the call on that. All right, well, we'll see everybody next week then. Hope you have a good one. Stay safe out there.
Feedback.
Bye.